Great Britain has a collection of varied landscapes and countryside to rival anywhere else in the world.
And the best way to see it is to walk.
And we are here to provide some ideas and inspiration. We are the team at Walks Around Britain, and we've been discovering some of the most interesting and varied short walks from across the country.
But every so often, we like to do a long distance walk.
There are many long distance trails around the UK, and to walk some would require several weeks. Fortunately, there are plenty which can be done within 5 to 7 days. And this time, I've chosen the Great Glen Way, a 79-mile walk in Scotland, from Fort William in the west to Inverness in the east. It's a route with dramatic scenery. The mountains of the Highlands are never too far away, but most of the walking is low level and mainly follows towpaths and woodland tracks, making it a perfect introduction to long distance walking.
So you're welcome to join me as I walk the Great Glen Way.
Most people walk the 79 miles of the Great Glen Way from the southwest to the northeast, and that's what I'll be doing, starting in Fort William and walking the mixture of canal towpaths and woodland trails which make up the trek to Inverness. The way is usually broke down into 6 days of walking, most of which are around a manageable 13 miles. It's the last day, day 6, which is a challenge for a lot of people, and this is because there aren't many places to stay along the way. However, if you'd prefer to break this day in two, ask your accommodation provider about getting picked up and taken back to the same spot the next day. So day 1 starts at Fort William and passes through its suburbs in the shadow of the mighty Ben Nevis. At Bannerby, I pass the magnificent Neptune's Staircase and follow the Caledonian Canal for a walk on the flat all the way to Gairlochy. This is the start of the Great Glen Way for walkers, the impressive marker stone at the east side of the A82 Fort William bypass. This location is the fort part of Fort William, first built by Oliver Cromwell's forces in 1654. It played an important part in the Jacobite story in the 1740s, but was sold and dismantled when this area was used as the railway yard for the West Highland Railway, when it reached Fort William in 1894. The first part of this section of the way is through some of the suburbs of Fort William, but you are still guaranteed some lovely views. The way is very well signposted, so you shouldn't get lost, although it is a good idea to have maps covering the route, or a guidebook, just to be safe. Here you can't miss the remains of old Invermoriston Castle, which is thought to be possibly the oldest castle in Scotland. A structure was noted here in 790 AD, but the remains here date from around 1280. 2 major battles were fought here in 1431 and 1645, and it's worth a stop for a while to have a look around. Before crossing the Soldiers' Bridge, apparently so named as it was built by the Royal Engineers as a training exercise. The bridge crosses the mouth of the River Lochy, and behind is the towering form of Ben Nevis, shrouded in the cloud. There's a little more suburb walking before a slight detour takes me to the sea lock at Corpac. This is the western end of the Caledonian Canal, the highly ambitious project to link the east and west coasts of Scotland with a waterway running along the Great Glen Fault. It was devised by the engineer Thomas Telford, and this is one of the 3 remaining original pepper pot lighthouses he built for the canal. From Corpac, the Great Glen Way follows the canal, and this gives me a great chance to really appreciate how complex a task it was to build this waterway. Work started in 1803, was supposed to take 7 years and cost £474,000. In the end, it took 12 years and cost over £900,000. For a long time after, it was considered a bit of a white elephant, as the new, larger ships had become too big to fit in the locks. And since Napoleon had been defeated at Waterloo, the Royal Navy's need for it had gone too. But even so, the challenges of building the canal were immense. And nowhere is that more clear than here at Bannerby. This is a mighty Neptune staircase, a series of 8 locks, which raises or lowers ships some 64 feet, or 20 metres. It takes around an hour and a half to get through it, and is the longest staircase lock in Britain. For the next section of this part of the walk, I'm joined by Stephen Wiseman, the Heritage Officer of the Scottish Waterways Trust, the charity which helps people connect to the canals in Scotland and protects their rich heritage and environments.
So Stephen, tell me what kind of wildlife you can expect to see along the canal.
It's the Great Glen, and it's got great wildlife. There's so much in this area. I mean, people would always want to expect to see eagle, and yes, you can see golden eagle here, but what I would say is, if you think it's an eagle, it's a buzzard. You'll know if it's an eagle. Right. But in this area, you know, otter are around here, kingfisher use stretches up here near Gairlochy, and if you look at some of the trees that are around here, beautiful old Scots pines over there, quite mature beech trees around too, not a native Scottish tree, but a lovely tree in itself, and loads of native species of bird, from swift and swallow been calling round about. It's the garden warbler and sedge warbler today. You know, there's so much here. Where would I even begin?
As well as the incredible wildlife and scenery, the canal is home to a range of engineering wonders too, from impressive hidden viaducts to humble swing bridges.
Stephen, how many swing bridges are there on the canal?
There are 10 swing bridges in the canal. Moy Bridge here is the only original one though, so this was put in when the canal was built way back in the early 1800s. The rest of them were all changed around about the 1930s when they redid the A82.
The canal might have been a white elephant just after it was completed, but today it is very busy. Some 1,300 vessels pass through the canal every year, and 75% of that traffic is for leisure. People enjoying this canal and the beautiful landscape. Here, the River Lochy runs alongside the canal and provides an interesting comparison.
Yeah, so this is one of my favourite sections here, just as we approach Gairlochy, which is just round the corner. The river just comes past us here, and we've got swallows overhead, sandpipers calling like mad below us. The dipper just flew up a minute ago. Just a beautiful, and in fact, did you see the fish just jumped there in the canal too? Some people think, you know, you can compare the canal and the river here side by side. Some people think the canal's pretty devoid of life. It's full of stuff. It's very clean. There's trout, salmon, stickleback, eels, and therefore there's otters coming down, and there's herring round about the edges. And
so you can see different things in both, can't you?
You can see different things in both. This is a really lovely little area, and not far from a cup of tea at Gairlochy.
That cup of tea does sound very appealing. And it's not long before we reach our destination.
So Stephen, we've arrived at the end.
We've arrived at the end of our walk today. This is Gairlochy. It's a lovely wee quiet tranquil spot. You see a lot of boats here will sit here at the end of the day, but the towpath ends here. Further on from here we're now moving into Lochlochy.
And that's where my second day will start. The small hamlet of Gairlochy is a quiet and peaceful place to start day 2. And today I'll be walking for around 13 miles, entirely on the north shore of Lochlochy, to South Laggan. I start by crossing over the Caledonian Canal, using a bridge with a bit of history. The terrain today is undulating and on mixed surfaces, with sections on forest tracks, paths and footpaths next to roads, and some sections on minor roads. Again, the Great Glen Way is waymarked at important points along the walk. And judging by this scene, the section has got some wonderful scenery for me after the break. Welcome back. I'm on day 2 of the 79-mile trek, which is the Great Glen Way. The day starts at Gairlochy, and by the end I'll have walked the length of Gairlochy and will finish at South Laggan. There are no shops on the route today, so I've made sure I've got all the water and food with me I'll need for the day. Some accommodation providers do pack lunches, and if yours does, make sure you order the night before. Virtually the whole of the walk today is alongside Gairlochy, which is the 3rd deepest loch in Scotland, and is said to be the home of Lizzie, Ness's sister. I don't hold out much hope in seeing either on this walk, but at least I'll have a camera at the ready. And every so often, it's good to stop to take in where you are.
I'm not tired already, it's just that this bench has got one of the best views in Britain.
It's tempting to stay here all day, but there's more walking to be done. If you fancy, you can backpack the long-distance routes in Scotland and camp along the way. Unlike most places in England and Wales, wild camping, as it's called, is allowed in Scotland, providing you're careful and considerate in where you pitch, and make sure you leave no trace. The way climbs slightly here and joins the B8005. It's not a busy road, but pay attention for vehicles coming in both directions. There are plenty of interesting detours off the way in this section, including the Keg Waterfall and the Clan Cameron Museum. This is the impressive River Arkick, which is one of Britain's shortest rivers, measuring only 1.25 miles from here to its source. With the road moving away from the loch, it's difficult to see that there's a huge body of water between myself and those mountains. The road takes a turn to the left, and the Great Glen Way turns away to the right. Although that doesn't mean the possible traffic problems have gone. Autumn is a stunning time to do the Great Glen Way. There's so much more variety in colour than in the summer. Here the path opens out again to allow for views of the far shore. Ahead is a small marina at South Laggan, where the man-made Caledonian Canal takes over from the naturally formed Gairlochy. The noise of the burn contrasts with the peace and tranquility of the ships moored in the loch. Not even the noise from the traffic on the A82 on the far side really interrupts the calm. On the left is the Invermoriston link, which is an alternative route on the Great Glen Way which bypasses Laggan and goes via Invermoriston on its way to Fort Augustus. To get down to Laggan Locks, the path needed is this one, on the right. Through the canal buildings, and I'm at my destination, Laggan Locks, and the end of day 2. The Great Glen Hostel is only another 1,000 yards up the towpath, or you could camp here for the night. Day 3, and some clouds have dropped down to say hello this morning. As I set out on today's section of the Great Glen Way, which is 12 miles from here at South Laggan to Fort Augustus. Today's terrain is again mixed, mostly flat, and following the canal towpath, an old railway line, through ancient woodland and some farmland. The weather is starting to change. My good luck avoiding the rain seems to have run out. But fortunately, most of this section has tree cover, thanks to the ancient woodland. The main road in the area is the A82, and I need to cross this vital link now to continue the walk. This can be very busy, so take care here. Now, as well as the A82 and the Caledonian Canal, there used to be another way through the Great Glen, a railway line which went from the national rail network at Speen Bridge to the banks of Loch Ness. But it wasn't successful, and the line closed to passengers in 1933. The remains of the former station here at Invermoriston is being restored as a railway museum, and since I was here, a length of railway track has been installed along the platform edge for the first time since 1947. I'm walking alongside Loch Oich, which certainly isn't the longest loch at 4 miles in length, but it is the highest point on the Caledonian Canal at some 406 feet, or 32 metres. The Great Glen Way takes advantage of the infrastructure legacy of the old railway. And most of this section is walking along the former trackbed. But for the next section, I'll be walking along the Caledonian Canal again. And that's after the break. Welcome back. I'm on day 3 of the 79-mile trek, which is the Great Glen Way. The day started at South Laggan, and by the end I'll have walked the length of Loch Oich, and will finish at Fort Augustus. The last part of the old railway line I'll be walking over is the bridge over the Calder Burn, before I cross over the A82 again, and switching to the far bank of the Caledonian Canal at Gairlochy Loch. This is the loch at the secluded spot of Kytra, some 2.5 miles from the end of this day's walk, at Fort Augustus. There are 3 holiday cottages which are available to let here, and I can't help but think that this must be one of the best places for a relaxing break. The end of my 3rd day is here, at Fort Augustus, with its 5 lochs. But I'm walking through the town to get my first view of Loch Ness. What was that over there? Oh, it was a fish. Day 4, and there's little chance of Nessie coming out with all the noise from the various ships queuing to get onto the loch. This one's a small one. The big leisure cruiser is waiting behind. Today's 10.5 mile walk starts for me from Fort Augustus on forest tracks, and then climbs high with some great views of Loch Ness, before a steep zigzag descent into Invermoriston. Again, the Great Glen Way is well waymarked at the points where you might get lost. Today's terrain is again mixed. There's a lot of these undulating forest tracks, and bits of pavement beside the main roads, with some short sections on gravel paths and minor roads. During the night, a torrent of rain dropped onto the highlands, which accounts for the power in the water coming down from the many streams and rivers on this section. But with much of today's walk in plantation woodland and regenerated forests, the paths have been mostly protected from being a quagmire by the tree cover. This is where the Forestry Commission planted plots of different species of trees in the 1930s, to see which would grow well in Scotland. This whole area is a managed working forest, looked after by the Forestry Commission Scotland. They plant, manage, thin and fell trees, which are then used to make everything from timber and toilet roll to fencing and kitchens. Then the cycle starts all over again, with young trees planted to replace those used. The route descends down to meet the A82 once again, to cross over the mighty River Morriston, which in Gaelic means River of the Waterfalls. Here, the current road bridge, built in the 1950s, offers a stunning view of Thomas Telford's original bridge, built in 1813. The village of Invermoriston is just on the far side of the bridge, which is where my bed for the night is at the end of day 4. Day 5. And Invermoriston has all the amenities required to stock me up for the trek ahead. Today, the route keeps to the north of Loch Ness, through forestry paths, which open out at times to allow good views every so often across the water to the hills on the south side of the loch, before a steep descent into Drumnadrochit. A steep descent at the end means a steep ascent somewhere else, and this section has front-loaded a climb right at the start, with a series of zigzags, before the route heads into pine forestry. The sheer size of these trees puts you into context with the landscape. And then when the forest opens out, there's stunning views of the most famous of all the lochs, Loch Ness. At 23 miles long, Loch Ness is the second largest lake in Britain by area, with Loch Lomond taking the top slot. But the great depth of Loch Ness means it holds nearly twice as much water as all the lakes in England and Wales combined. The area around the loch features a variety of walks, with more waymarked trails and easy routes suitable for families compared to some other parts of the Highlands. Further along, there's a sign for a rather intriguing detour to a stone seat, which was built in Victorian times for the ladies of the day to partake in afternoon tea and scones. And if a stone seat didn't catch your imagination, how about a stone cave? Apparently, it was built as a shelter for a washerwoman on her many journeys between the villages in the area. I think this has been my favourite bit of the walk so far. Even with the oncoming clouds, this is a truly magical place. And it's worth a stop to take it all in. But not for too long, as I've still got some great walking to do before I finish day 5. Welcome back. I'm partway through day 5 of my trek along the Great Glen Way between Fort William and Inverness, and at the moment I'm walking alongside the mighty Loch Ness. Still no sign of Nessie though. As I've found throughout my walk, the Great Glen Way is very well signposted, and it's possible to walk the way even without a map, but even so, I'd always recommend taking one just in case. I'm not the only one out for a ramble today. My destination at the end of today's walk, Drumnadrochit, known locally as just Drum. out of the forest now and dropping down towards Drum. And my bed for the night after my favourite day of the walk so far. Day 6, my last day walking the Great Glen Way. Today is mainly easy walking through farmland and forests, which is reassuring as I've got some 20 miles to cover today, before arriving at the end of the Great Glen Way at Inverness. It starts by walking along the ever-present A82. But fortunately, it's not long before the way takes a left, and I'm climbing again through a variety of gates. But always waymarked, so I don't choose the wrong one. Remember to leave all gates as you found them. I'm feeling really dwarfed by the sheer size of these trees, which have virtually enclosed the forest trail. But there are clearings every so often for another view of Loch Ness. Attempting the Great Glen Way in 6 days, like I am, means this last section is a hefty 20 miles to get to Inverness. But you can always break this day in half at Aberachan. Speak to your accommodation provider, who might be able to collect you at a fixed point and then take you back there the following morning. Those clouds are bringing sporadic showers, which are supposed to get more intense later in the day. Walking through the forest gives me a natural umbrella with the tree canopy. The Great Glen Way is maintained by a team of rangers. Who are always happy to have a wee chat. With those short showers turning into the promised longer ones, I've reached the highest point on the walk, some 400 metres above sea level, or 1,300 feet. It's not all downhill from here, but there isn't a lot of climbing for the rest of the walk. That sky isn't looking the most inviting at the moment. It's not long before I'm in another forest. This section is one of the last remaining breeding strongholds for the endangered black grouse. worth remembering, the Great Glen Way is possibly the only long-distance trail you can do by either walking, cycling or actually kayaking, using the canal and the locks. The rain clearly has no intentions of stopping now, but the paths on this section are very well maintained. "4 miles to go, and there's the fair city of Inverness at the foot of the valley." After skirting around the suburbs of Inverness, I reach the banks of the Ness to cross over this stunning bridge built in 1845 onto the lovely Ness Islands, which are a popular short walk destination for locals. Across the far side and up a steep climb brings me to Inverness Castle, which today houses the city's sheriff court. But most importantly, this is the end of the Great Glen Way. Or precisely here, at this monolith, which has information about the area and the trail. Well, I touched the start at Fort William, and now I'm touching the end at Inverness. Now to have a well-deserved hot bath and a cup of tea. So, 79 miles of walking from Fort William to Inverness. That's the Great Glen Way. It's been a wonderful walk through some of the finest landscapes and countryside. It's provided me with some views and memories I'll never forget. And really, it hasn't been too difficult. So if you'd like some information about the Great Glen Way, or on the other walks in our series, you can always visit our website, walksaroundbritain.co.uk. And if you attempt all or part of the Great Glen Way, let us know on our social media channels. We'd love to hear from you. But until next time, thanks for watching and happy walking.